Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I did the notes with Figma. So this is like a new. Can you see Figma here? Oh gosh.
Yeah.
You can see it? Okay, good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read through these slides. It's basically going to talk about what are rounds, the benefits, the challenges, how we use it, application, and then we'll do a Q&A. So it takes about 6 minutes as I practiced it, and then hopefully we'll have a nice little Q&A after, and hopefully it's however long we need to go, 15 minutes, let's say. This is rounds is the first one in meeting practice. And these are all the other ones in the meeting practice. It's sort of a fundamental skill to government governance and collaboration. It seems like it's a basis for so many other things, and it's inside of other patterns. And it's connected. Oh, wait a minute, did I miss one? No. And it's connected to the principle of equivalence. And so I'm going to read this one of equivalence. Involve people in making and evolving decisions that affect them, so that you increase engagement and accountability and make use of the distributed intelligence towards achieving and evolving your objective. And it sort of feels like, consent of the governed. And which is, I did go down a rabbit hole of some founding documents, the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, because of the season here, but I made a choice not to put that in, and I don't know why I'm going there. Here we go.
And just so you know, Newman, we can only see half of your presentation screen for some reason.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's not cool. I think I shared is this the screen? Like I'm scrolling up and down?
Yeah. Well, we see both of them. Yeah.
Geez. Hold on. I'm gonna stop the share. See, I had a feeling this might be. Hold on. I want to try it one more time. I need slide deck. This one. How is that?
Yes, I think.
Is that the whole thing?
It's clipping off the left side a little bit, but I think we got most of it.
How about that now?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I want to go. Well, now I'm going to keep going right here. Principle of equivalence. And these principles are connected to all of these patterns. So I am not a big fan of the Figma presentation. Okay. It's lagging on me. Go one more. Go one more. It's not working. Okay.
Live demo.
Okay. Yeah, live demo here. Here we go. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stick with Google from now on. Sucks to be you. Okay, I'm gonna try it one more time. And yeah, I think I'm sorry, y'all.
Oh, good.
Well, okay. So man, I did go to a lot of trouble. Here we go. Hold on. I think that this thing, I'm going to shut down some windows and I'm going to go back to this.
I'm going to call this a great experiment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was an experiment. And we'll just go back to sharing the whole screen. And can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, this is the rounds. I'm gonna read all of this. In a group meeting, go around the circle, giving everyone the chance to speak in turn. Rounds are a group facilitation technique and meant to maintain equivalence and support effective dialogue. So be clear on the purpose and intended outcome of each round. Now, this is sort of advice to people that are doing it. And sit in a circle and begin each round with a different person changing the direction, clockwise, counterclockwise, which brings variation to who speaks first and last, and to the order of contributions. And so this is the graphic that they give, and this is what they sort of expect, this over here. But of course, this is what we look like. You know, and we generally do this thing where we generally use rounds for a check-in and a check-out, but it also is for our consent-based decision making. So they talk about sitting in a circle, which we don't really do. We do this in Zoom, and then begin each round. And I was always, you can always remember that kid that his last name began with Z and was always at the end of the thing. And here's my pitfall. This is a personal thing. I would be like this guy, and I would always sort of wait and feel bad or nervous and wouldn't really, I would just think about what I'm going to say. Just think about what I'm going to say. And figuring out like a response. But then, Nori, when we took that Presencing Institute, I think they addressed that specifically about really just receiving what it is. And then when it comes to your turn, you can respond in a genuine way. But this is just one of the pitfalls. So the application of this pattern for check-ins and checkouts, decision-making, gathering opinions and perspectives before making the decision, and in the and feedback, which is really what our clarifying questions in our decision making, in the reasoned decision making, there's a clarifying round, like check on understanding, and then there's an objection and concern round. So it basically, I've been learning that this is a real skill around, and being able to participate and facilitate around is very, very, it's a skill that can be learned. Brainstorming is another way so that, that everyone gets to contribute the ideas, and then others. And I want to know if you have got other applications that you know of rounds, but we're not going to talk about that now. We'll hold all the questions to the end. We do the Q&A, but just keep an idea if you've got another application for rounds. So the benefits: enhanced participation, encouraging all members to give, to participate. And Nori, thank you for that sort of insight into, like, it's a facilitator tool to sort of manage and manage the participation, to spread it out or to consolidate or focus it. Equal opportunity, ensuring no voice dominates. And we talk about this with the way of counsel, step up or step back. It allows like quiet people to speak out more, and allows people that are typically louder to sort of maybe be more receptive or listen. The structured dialogue makes things more efficient and productive. It's a good thing, and we can think about other benefits. And challenges: time management. It can be time consuming, especially in large groups. Some people will take a long time to check in. Some people take a short time to check in. The risk of repetitive sort of saying the same things, and it's a skill to learn. So you may have people that are unskilled with it, etc. And that is it. Rounds are sweet. And time for Q&A. So, do you have any like general ideas about rounds? Do you have any applications or benefits or challenges? So that's what I'm kind of curious to hear. And does anybody have any right off the bat that they saw?
I could jump in.
Yeah.
I think you put some stuff, I see it in situations where you expect everybody to contribute, like agile stand-ups. The purpose is to get a report from everybody.
Yeah.
It's useful to do. Whenever the conversation is popcorn style, but then it gets a little tense or contentious, it's often useful to fall back into rounds to make sure that everybody has a chance to voice their opinion or pass. Like, I was in a meeting recently where we didn't even know there was really a tension until the checkout round, and somebody goes, well, I thought blah on this topic, and we were like, what? And we halted the checkout and we said, let's talk about this. This is important.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a realization that maybe if we had done rounds earlier, that person would have had a chance to speak instead of saving it for the checkout.
Exactly. That sense of when you're in a meeting and you've got a question or there's something that needs to be voiced, but doesn't until the end. Yeah.
And then one last thing that popped to mind was when we were taking the sociocracy courses with John Buck, one technique that he introduced me to was to facilitate the round by saying who's up and who's next. Since we aren't sitting in a circle, it's often useful so that people know who should be talking now, and also who's next or who's on deck is a useful thing to allow them to be prepared to speak rather than be surprised by just calling the next person, which is good or bad, depending on whether you want that spontaneity. But often I find it useful to say, okay, Newman, and then Roberto. And then it gives Roberto a chance to like start to gather his thoughts or get ready.
Yep, and that I noticed that you do that, and it's kind of cool that it is a practiced or an intentional thing. And I was sort of like, oh, the mechanics of Zoom, like we don't all sit around, so we don't know where the thing is. Mm-hmm. And I wondered about like a tool that might be a kind of a fun tool to say, hey, in the circle, while I was doing the research, I was like, oh, perhaps the tooling will kind of catch up and that we can all sort of sit, virtually in a circle. Yeah, and then I do like that this person's next and then the next person, and that gives a little bit of time to prepare, but not enough time to, yeah, that's good.
And it's often useful for a facilitator to call people out in an order, especially in a Zoom room when there isn't a circle. If you just go, okay, let's do a round. It's often awkward as people don't know if they want to step in first or wait, or
right.
So giving them that structure often makes it go a little bit faster to allow people to call people onto the floor.
And that idea of popcorn is kind of an unstructured circle or unstructured round, meaning that anybody could pop in from the circle. Anyone else? Does anyone else get that feeling of being nervous around like waiting for their turn?
Yeah, I was just thinking about like instances where like I've been in meetings before where they kind of do rounds, they call the first person and then that person calls the next person. For some reason, that really messes me up. I don't know why that is. But they like the S3 rounds, they don't suggest that at all.
That's right. They talk about the circle, like physical circle around, but they don't sort of think about it in virtual space. Yeah. But I have come across that pattern of one person gets picked and then they pick the other person, and you're saying that for whatever reason that kind of creeps you out.
Yeah, I wonder if it says some. Oh, go ahead, Nori.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking, I find in a small group, it kind of is okay, but in a large one, you put the onus of remembering who has spoken already on that person who's on the spot to pick the next person. And that can often get a little uncomfortable too.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like the fulcrum there is the skill and art of facilitation. what I really like about a lot of S3 patterns, like even peer review did this. It said, if you want to scale this, you need a facilitator. They were very explicit about this, that, you can't skill up in groups if you don't have leaders of a type. This is a type of leader. It's that new leadership that we're getting exposed to so often, which is not like get out in front of everybody and make demands on people and stuff, but get behind them and really support people in their efforts. That's real leadership in these spaces. Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting. Like a new governance model, new patterns requiring new leadership skill.
Yeah, it really speaks to like grassroots. Everything comes up from the bottom.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, so those are some challenges. What about benefits? Like the benefit, that this idea of like being a part of the equivalence. What about other benefits of going and around? The principle of equivalence, meaning everybody gets a chance.
Yeah, there's like a benefit challenge kind of polarity buried in there, which is like you get upskilled. Like I don't speak in meetings, but in Odin I do, because I've upskilled here and I've gotten that comfort level and stuff like that. Like I stay out of conversations. So that was a challenge for me to do that and to develop that and to get comfortable enough to be able to do that. There's another side of that, which is like the responsibility that comes with having voice. So there's this structure, like I kind of don't think that rounds are generative for voice, but if you have generative conditions, rounds are this really great tooling to consistently give people that opportunity to surface voice. But you almost seem to need other stuff in the environment to be generative, because when, like, I didn't hear it in your presentation, but there's the concept of pass, right? If you get called in,
Yes.
called on in a round, you can say I pass, and that's like very ethical to be able to have that option in there and to have it accepted and respected by others.
Yep. I didn't, it's interesting because it didn't really come up in the S3 pattern. They didn't sort of have it as one of the bullet points, but it certainly is something that we have accepted and that we've, ethically included in our general thing. Like, that idea of having a pass is, I'm curious, like how and when it's used. And that might be, Mhm.
Yeah, and then you've got like stand-ups. There's no passes in stand-ups. Like you're there for a reason. You're there to stand up. Like otherwise, why have the meeting?
Right.
So the pass on that would be I didn't go to the meeting, maybe, or something like that.
Uh-huh. And what do you think of the stand-up, like as a team, as a version of a round? That it's a structured conversation, that like has this three-part thing. You can do it, in as your whole team, or you can do it async. Do you think that's kind of like a version of a round?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about it, like rounds to me is like one of three things, maybe more, but definitely three things that are like core sociocracy, because that is how you have voice. That is like you can't surface objections without rounds, because there's just not the space to do it. And so it's to me, that's part of its DNA that goes all the way back. If you go all the way back to the beginning of sociocracy, there's something like rounds in there at every stage of it. So it seems to me to be really fundamental.
Yeah, I definitely think that is, and that's something that kind of came up in the research, is like this is a skill. And then really what's fundamental to rounds is this idea of one, valuing getting everyone's voice, and then the skill of listening and the skill of speaking. And that might be the educator in me that's saying like, okay, how to break these down into like components to be taught, to be drilled, like a little voice, like a little drill instructor. I definitely hear that it's a core and fundamental thing to sociocracy.
Yeah, and that really speaks to like what I was bringing up when I said there was a polarity there, because if you are given space for voice and you don't use it, at what point can you come back into a system and say, hey, I was never heard, right? Because you had space. So you have some responsibility in a round that you won't waste your opportunity. And this is like life. You don't want to waste your minutes in life either. But it's a lot of like, there's a lot of responsibilities, a lot of upskilling. Like I needed to do a lot of upskilling before I could be heard in a meeting. And it had nothing to do with other people giving me space. It was all about me. I had to get comfortable. And that's a lot of tension for a group to carry, which is why I think it works so much better when you localize and keep the meetings small. You don't have huge meetings where non-stakeholders are being given space to speak, because that there's like an imbalance of relevance and weight for people that maybe need to continue to develop in that space. It comes back to that growth and development part that's so core in S3, where if you're not growing and developing, why are you using S3?
Uh-huh.
Kind of funny because I see it.
Yeah, keep going. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say that I was seeing it from the other side. In my case, I sometimes feel like I talk too much. Like if I feel like a quiet space, I feel almost compelled to speak up. And sometimes it just means that you're talking nonsense. And I also like when I start talking, sometimes I just tend to go on, and I could go for hours talking things that don't even connect together. And rounds to me, you were just saying about not just talking but listening, and it just that structure of not only are you going to be called, so you're going to have an opportunity to talk, but also knowing that someone's going after you, so you need to sort of respect that space that's coming. So you kind of just say, all right, I'll say my part, but we all need to go. So maybe I'll just stick to what I want to say. And it gives you that time, like Nori said beforehand, so you can prepare and say, all right, here is what I was thinking. And let's leave it at that. And we can go around again and again and again. So yeah, on the other side, I guess, of being too talkative or saying too much, I think it also helps the structure, helps control what you're going to say or be more thoughtful about what you're going to say.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
reminds me of the one little thing here of the Quaker meetings, because they have a thing called like where they just sit in silence and they'll do these. I've never done it. I'd like to go. There is a Quaker house here, but from what I understand is that they just sort of randomly popcorn style will express. I don't know if they ramble like you're saying, Roberto, but if I was in a quiet space, I would want to fill it up. I experienced the same thing. It's just like wanting to like pack in the words. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me want to bring up 2 points. One was the idea of like for some people it's difficult to speak, and for others it's difficult to stop speaking.
Yeah.
There's like a built-in ratio that tells you about weight and importance. We have 5 people in this meeting. If we did a round, it would be a 5-to-1 ratio of listening to speaking, right? And so that's a lot of upskilling on listening. And I would argue that in my life, most of what I've seen in myself and others is the need. I guess there's 6 of us. Boy, I'm a terrible counter. That there's a need for more listening and better listening, effective listening. So I love to see that the ratio is so pitched. Maybe in the future you don't need a ratio that's so pitched, but we need it now. Like we just need it in culture and society. That's what we need now, is more listening. And maybe that's just true of humans. I'm not sure. Newman, you brought up a point. What was the last point you brought up? You were sharing something about the Quaker meeting. Yeah. I might have lost it. I had something I was going to say about an example from something, but I can't remember it now.
Right. Yeah, that there's like a big quiet room and that they pop in. But I'm curious if Randall or Simon or Nori, any other, and we're sort of trying to collect things about like applications, where to use rounds, where you see a benefit, and where you see challenges to them, or like a personal experience or tension around rounds.
When there's lots of back and forth that's happening in a forum that's supposed to be a group meeting, but which is in practice just being a conversation between two, it feels like an opportunity for someone, facilitator maybe, or someone who's seeing that dynamic, to say, well, what about Simon? What about Simon?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on my NixOS and I somehow can't turn up the speaker, so it's really hard to
Oh
hear.
no. Oh, sorry, man.
I
Uh-oh.
suppose I will listen to the YouTube video later on still, just to make yeah, to hear the stuff that I have been missing.
No worries. Hopefully you can get it squared away.
Couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
Just the dynamics of rounds. I think Jeremy brought it up, is that it really, like, the larger and larger the group gets, the more and more listening you should be doing throughout the meeting, and rounds really helps even that out. And it really helps us develop those skills around listening. Another thing is Reinventing Organizations talks about teal organizations, and one of the key defining things that transitions into teal is the disidentification with ego. And I think rounds also help us do that a little bit, where you may have a reply to something that somebody just said, and you want to jump in and drive your point to either look smart or contribute or whatever. But if you have to wait 4 or 5 people and somebody else brings it up, you kind of got to let go of the fact that that's no longer your contribution. And it allows us to develop that skill a little more, to say, the idea got out there, yay, I don't have to speak up anymore. So it's like, I forgot who mentioned it, but as an internal development tool for people, I think it really helps with that too, to be able to like kind of relax into collaboration and not have to jump in and reinforce our egos all the time. We can just trust that the things that we want to say will probably be said, but after a round, if it doesn't get said, then you can bring it in because the group missed it. But I think it's a really useful tool for that. It can really be helpful for development. And just anecdotally, we used rounds at my Zen center. We had something called a tea circle, and we would serve everybody tea after we sat and meditated. And then we just go around in a circle and people could contribute whatever they wanted. And all of the introverts in the room loved it because they aren't used to social situations where they're able to just talk into a safe space. And when people find it hard to find that timing to jump into a conversation, rounds makes it really easy because your time is very fixed and you have a place to contribute. And I think so it can support all sorts of useful dynamics. And interestingly, the extroverts in the group hated the tea circle because they felt it was really hard to not speak up and have that artificial kind of stilted conversation that went around.
And one of the things they called it was a structured conversation. And I think that this, once we sort of get rounds, that then you can kind of play around and sort of build on, use it as a building block. For instance, this idea of the as a stand-up as a round, or for instance, and I don't know if this is the way the T circle was, but I would love to have like the timer, like really structured, like fill the space, not like, oh, I'm having a good time, that's my check-in. But no, you have 15 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute, and then you're on a real safari. I did what as a part of my facilitation experiment with Facilitators Collective. We did a thing where it was a time thing, and I asked people to speak for 2 minutes just on a topic, and that got to practicing it. And I feel like rounds got to practicing speaking, practicing listening, and I feel like this is an entry into doing that. And it's interesting that the way people's personalities was out, and the whole like ego wrangling. It's a simple pattern that it's easy to implement, but I think it can have far-ranging impacts. And I've heard that this is one of the first patterns. Like people say, well, we found out about S3 and we just decided to make our simple change, and we just did rounds in front of meetings, and then it changed all this other stuff. possibly perhaps about that ego wrangling and the listening and speaking sort of dynamics.
Yeah. At a very fundamental level, sociocracy describes human interaction where objections to what's going on do not defray or disappear into the ether. They stick around until they're resolved. And this, you can dig into that as much as you want to. It meets people's needs. It gives people voice. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes from it. But these objections, these places where differences are not generating connectivity, that's causing people to fall out of systems. That's causing ossification of systems that have no new input, no new energy coming into them because of it. It's almost evolutionary, and so being able to maintain the objection, maintain the tension of the objection is the same kind of energy that you have when you have the emergence of consciousness or life itself. Like this is needed. This tension and this polarity is needed. And when you try to have a group collaborative environment where you make everybody go through a consensus process and you make everybody agree, you're almost physically pushing all that out. And this was what was recognized by the Quakers, that there's differences of opinion here, and they're not trivial. It's deep. It goes to the very reason we're here, wherever we happen to be. We need to get these things recognized.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, definitely. The difference is that polarity is that real generative sauce. And if like consensus that like crushes it and says, oh no, there's no difference here, we all agree.
Right. And that's just throwing some stuff out. Yeah,
you're kind of hamstringing and taking, like, well, we're going to try to do this without any energy. We're not going to have any coffee. We're going to try to brainstorm, but we're not doing a coffee. Sorry, and I don't think the Quakers do coffee, but they do get into Quaker fights and these meetings, I guess. I don't know. I've never been there. That might be offensive, but it's good. But I like what you're putting down there, Jeremy. That's awesome.
So I've got two kind of more down to earth questions about rounds.
Okay.
One, you kind of addressed it, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but it would be like how much time, like is there a way to sort of make the amount of time that people have in a round? Like, do you limit it? Is it a good practice to limit it? Or is there some sort of quality of the meeting that tells you how much time, like, is it the number of people? Is it the topic and how divisive it is, or how tense it is? Like, is it a tension-based metric? And then the other question, which kind of goes along with this, is who can initiate a round? Is it only the facilitator? Can it be, if somebody else wants to initiate it, do they have to request it from the facilitator? Obviously, I'm talking about like individual rules or something, but is there a principle at work there?
Quality question. The thing about time, I feel like that rolls into that, like, how do you scale it? Because it generally is like, it's a function of how long the meeting is, how many people are there. And I would be open, and that's sort of one of those challenges, like that time management. And I would be interested to see and do some more research on how people scale up the check-in. I do know that one thing that they've done is the think, pair, share method. And it basically is we pair off. It was like, here's our prompt, and then Rahmani, Grace, she used this visual check-in. So it was like the low, medium, and high. And then another thing that she did was that we would, and it's common in other forms, so it's like if you get more than 25 people in a group, then you break into breakouts of 3 or 4, and then you do your share, your check-in with that smaller group, and then you come back. And that allows you to, so that you don't have to listen to that ratio of listening to speaking. So yeah, the time allocation thing I think works to scale.
That's really interesting. What you just described there is constraint theory. It's like that that identification of like people kind of self-assigning to groups, that identifies bottlenecks is what that's doing. You're finding out like if you've got a constraint somewhere in the system. And so if a lot of people have like high bandwidth or something like that, like you've identified that you don't have any bottlenecks for for scaling something. But if a lot of people are low, then you do, like, the breakout helps with that because you get the constraints more space to get their whatever they're there to do to get that done. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's something that I think we can play around with because it's part of the technology, breakout rooms. And it's just like, if you're to do that in physical space, wouldn't be able to do that. Hey Nori, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I love that method of getting more stuff in depending on the number of people. Another example was recently I was facilitating a couple of ULab case clinics, and it's really designed for 4 or 5 people, and we had like 10 or 12. And the first time we ran it, people took all the time that they wanted to give their thing. We did a round, but each person really should have taken 2 minutes, but they took 5 or 10, and the meeting crunched down so that when we got to the generative dialogue portion, it was supposed to be 20 minutes of generative dialogue, and it was like 5 minutes. And it felt really like, oh, we missed the best part of it. So the next time we ran it, we actually ran a timer and said, each person has 2 minutes, go. And just the fact of that timer there allowed them to condense what they're going to say to fit into that time. And most people came under the time because they saw the time kind of ticking down. And we were able to get to the generative dialogue, and that was the juicy part. And it didn't, I don't think it reduced the quality of the round share. It just made it more concise, and they had to not like be really
verbose.
Fill the time. They had to be concise, and so that tool can work as well. It all depends on what your goals are, I guess, too. So a lot of it is facilitation and planning the time. And if you do have time constraints or too many people for the process or different things, you need to kind of figure it out. But I think there are different ways to do it.
That seems really relevant to like the upcoming constitutional workshops for Cardano. Like, because we've seen with these workshops in the past that there's halfway through, even with 4 hours, halfway through, there's not, like, everybody can see there's just not enough time left to get to everything that's on the list. They start to sense that, and they start to take shortcuts, and they start to, okay, well, let's just move the top 2 over. We don't have time to clarify a top 3 or whatever is happening in the workshop.
And
That's a great point.
And once that pressurization happens, it really spoils the milk.
It does.
Like it doesn't. It's not like, there's something that happens that's qualitative. And so if the meeting is can't sort of expand to fit its thing, then you're just going to get a different outcome. It's not linear. It's sort of like, it's all, if you feel any kind of pressurization, then it's just the quality and the tone of everything is going to be spoiled.
Yeah. You go from unpacking constitutional values to working on how to fit a meeting into the last 30 minutes. And they're different problems. They're very different problems.
Yeah. I do think that those workshops, and that it could be one of those, basically what I'm seeing is it's a simple pattern. And I know we're getting, oh man, we're 10 minutes. It's like, am I the only one that does this? Are you stalling, Jeremy? Because I wanted to see how fast you could do your thing. I wanted to see how fast you could do your thing.
Dude, I'm 185 words per minute. I can do this.
All right. But I appreciate the conversation around this. I'm really stoked that, we've got a lot of experience with this pattern, and we've got a lot of, like, it's an important part of the governance model. It's an important part of collaborating. It's an important part of moving towards these principles, mostly equivalence, but also transparency. Like, what if everybody had, like, there's a lot of the principles that sort of tie into rounds. So thanks for the good conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Newman. Alrighty.
I'm so bummed about that, about the